Top Gear, the show that was dubbed the greatest show on television by critics, has been cancelled with no signs of returning anytime soon. Freddie Flintoff, the presenter of Top Gear, suffered a near-fatal crash, where after his family explained he was lucky to come out of it alive. The BBC responded to this incident by paying off Flintoff a handsome sum of £9 million, while also apologising to the presenter, and the fallout has seen this once nation's favourite TV show be shelved. But the truth is, not that many people watch Top Gear anymore anyway. A show that once had the nation gripped in its hands, and almost everybody watched it. So let's talk about the history a little bit. Though having previous iterations prior to the 2002 relaunch of Top Gear, it would be this latest version that would garner immense popularity, and the iconic trio of presenters in Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James May would command the TV nation's attention for well over a decade. But before we get into the unsettling story of what happened with Top Gear behind the scenes, let's get an insight about how the show changed when this trio of presenters left the production. So the departure of these core presenters in Jeremy, Richard, and James saw the ratings drop dramatically. The decline in ratings followed the show being taken over by the new presenters Chris Evans, Matt LeBlanc, Rory Reid, Sabine Schmitz, and Eddie Jordan back in 2016. The first episode recorded 4.4 million views, which was more than 1 million lower than the last episode that included Jeremy and the gang. Now that is a really telling start for me, because you'd think once everyone knew there was going to be a host of new presenters, there would at least be a big amount of curiosity to see how the show was going to be executed. But no, already a dramatic drop in viewers for their first episode. The new presenters' ratings continue to drop to 2.8 million for the second episode, and 2.4 for the third episode. And by the end of the season, many people knew that this wasn't a big success, and Chris ended up stepping down. So the final season that included the iconic trio was immensely highly rated across all reviewing platforms. But come the next season, the season with the new hosts, which was season 23 at this point, the reviews were, let's say, not so great. So clearly, the show was almost entirely dependent on those three presenters and their on-screen chemistry. They were clearly close friends that had fun, which you felt as a viewer, and the BBC found a remarkably compatible trio in these guys of entertainers for one of their flagship shows in Top Gear. So, what did go wrong? Why did all the presenters leave? Did such a radical change that would degrade the show so massively have to happen? Well, that brings us to the second part of this video and the dark side of Jeremy Clarkson. Before that, a quick gentle reminder to subscribe to this channel, Storyzilla, if you think you enjoy this kind of content. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you as well for liking this video. Alright, let's go on. The alpha of the trio, and the fan favourite was Jeremy Clarkson. Though people did appreciate the other two co-hosts in James May and Richard Hammond, and they were important personalities in the show, they were far more passive and less controversial than lead presenter Clarkson. Through the years, controversy followed Clarkson everywhere he went. In particular, he was accused of making insensitive remarks or references on multiple highly publicised occasions between 2011 and 2014. Finally, the BBC had enough and gave Clarkson a quote final warning, as he calls it. But Clarkson would end up exploding behind the scenes, resulting in a physical assault. The website /Gear writes the following: "The straw that broke the camel's back with the BBC occurred in March of 2015, when Jeremy Clarkson became upset over the food options at a hotel where the show was filming. According to reports, Clarkson began hurling verbal abuse at producer Timon. This included racial remarks about Timon's Irish ancestry. He then punched Timon in the face without provocation. After trying to apologize to Timon, who didn't file a complaint, Clarkson self-reported the incident to the BBC. The network suspended production on Top Gear pending an investigation, and on March the 25th in 2015, it announced that it would not renew Clarkson's contract, which soon expired at the end of the month. Co-hosts Richard Hammond and James May departed the show soon after also. At this point, as you can imagine, there was a media frenzy that followed this incident, and journalists and reporters followed around all three hosts trying to get comment for what happened and the subsequent firing of Clarkson and why the two co-hosts were also leaving. But the truth is, all three of the presenters were actually close friends just as they appeared on screen, and essentially the co-hosts joined Clarkson in leaving as an act of camaraderie. A report in 2015 says this: Top Gear presenter James May has ruled out returning to the BBC show without Jeremy Clarkson, saying it would be, quote, lame to do it with a, quote, surrogate Jeremy. May said the idea that he would return alongside fellow co-host Richard Hammond with a new presenter in place of Clarkson was a, quote, non-starter. But May said he wanted to continue to work with the BBC and did not rule out all three presenters one day returning to the show, saying this, quote, me and Hammond with a surrogate Jeremy as a non-starter, it just wouldn't work. That would be lame, or orcs, as young people say. It has to be all three of us. You can't put a surrogate Jeremy in and expect us to carry on. It would be forced. I don't believe they would be stupid enough to try that. And turns out they didn't try that. So Clarkson's wingmen in Hammond and May left with him. They would go off to do their own Amazon Prime production called The Grand Tour. And Top Gear's attempts of revamping the show with new hosts generally flopped and didn't satisfy the masses, and the show, Top Gear, began to float around in obscurity until recently, where the show has been shelved. Tragic, really. A show that everyone enjoyed for many, many years ended up going up in flames due to behind the scenes controversy.